The last thing Maria Santos remembered was the weight of 1,000 bodies pressing against her chest, the smell of incense and sweat, the sound of hymns turning to screams, and then darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. She was no longer surrounded by pilgrims singing Gloria in Excelsis Deo. She was in a small room with whitewashed walls, and a man she had never seen before was burning her passport in a clay bowl. "You are safe now," he said in broken Portuguese, though nothing in his eyes suggested safety. "You will stay with me." Maria tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. "My husband, my children. I have 12 children waiting for me in Portugal." The man smiled, a smile that would haunt her for the next 26 years. "Portugal," he said, watching the flames consume her identity, "is very far away." Maria Santos had prayed for this journey her entire life. At 47 years old, with 12 children and 9 siblings, she had never left her village nestled in the mountains of northern Portugal. The farthest she had traveled was to Porto, to see her eldest son receive his diploma. But Jerusalem, the Holy Land, where Christ walked, where he died, where he rose again, that was the dream she whispered to God every night. "Are you certain about this?" her husband Antonio asked, folding his calloused hands over hers. He was a farmer, a man of the earth, skeptical of journeys that took one away from the soil. "It's dangerous. The news says there are troubles in that region." "I have to go," Maria said. "I've waited 47 years. How many more do I have left?" She didn't tell him about the dream where she stood at the entrance of the Holy Sepulchre, and a voice, neither male nor female but impossibly ancient, told her, "You will not return the same." She had interpreted it as a promise of spiritual transformation. She had no idea it was a warning. The morning of their departure, Maria stood in the doorway of their farmhouse, looking at her children. The eldest, Miguel, was 32 now, with children of his own. The youngest, Elena, was only 8 months old, sleeping in her sister Sophia's arms. Sophia was 3, too young to understand why her mother was crying. "Mama, what will you bring us?" Sophia asked, her dark eyes wide with innocent curiosity. Maria knelt down, pressing her forehead against her daughter's. "I'll bring you a doll, my love, a beautiful doll from the Holy Land." She would never forget the way Sophia smiled. She would replay that smile 10,000 times in the years to come, in a room with no windows, in a country where no one spoke her language. "I'm leaving my children to God," Maria announced to her eldest sister Clara. "Take care of them. I'll be back in 2 weeks." Clara embraced her. "Go with God, sister, and come back to us." Maria walked down the stone path, turning back at every step. Each time she looked, Sophia was still waving. Elena was still sleeping. The house was still there, solid and unchanging, as it had been for generations. She did not know she was looking at them for the last time. The pilgrimage was not organized through the church. That was the first mistake. Antonio had found a travel agency in Lisbon that promised a genuine Holy Land experience at half the price of the official diocesan tours. They would fly to Tel Aviv, take a bus to Jerusalem, spend Holy Week walking the Via Dolorosa, attend Easter Mass at the Holy Sepulchre, and return home transformed. "It's the same places," Antonio had argued. "Why pay twice as much for the bishop's blessing?" What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that unofficial tours meant unofficial records. The travel agency kept no copies of passports. There was no official list sent to the Portuguese embassy. If something went wrong, there would be no one to call, no database to search, no system to alert. Maria and Antonio were invisible. Jerusalem in April was unlike anything Maria had imagined. The narrow streets of the old city pulsed with life, merchants selling olive wood crosses, Arab boys carrying trays of sweet tea, Jewish families rushing to the Western Wall, Armenian priests in black robes, Greek Orthodox monks with long beards, and everywhere, everywhere, pilgrims. They had arrived on Good Friday, the most sacred day for Christian pilgrims. The Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrows, the path Christ walked to his crucifixion, was packed with thousands of believers from every corner of the world. Filipinos carrying life-sized crosses, Brazilians singing in Portuguese, Italian nuns praying the rosary, American evangelicals with cameras around their necks. And Maria, tears streaming down her face, touching the ancient stones where her Savior had fallen. "I can feel him here," she whispered to Antonio. "I can feel his presence." Antonio smiled, though he was more concerned with keeping track of their tour group in the chaos. The crowd was growing denser by the minute, bodies pressed against bodies. The air grew thick with incense and body heat. They reached the Church of the Holy Sepulchre at noon, the holiest site in Christianity, built over the place where Christ was crucified, buried, and resurrected. The entrance was a small doorway, absurdly small for such a sacred place, and pilgrims funneled through it like water through a narrow pipe. That was when the singing began. A group of Ethiopian pilgrims started a hymn on the roof of the church. The melody was haunting, ancient, rising and falling like waves. Other groups joined in, each in their own language, their own tradition, and the air filled with a cacophony of worship. Then someone pushed. Later, investigators would never determine who pushed first. It could have been an overeager pilgrim trying to touch the stone of anointing. It could have been a pickpocket fleeing. It could have been nothing at all, just the natural physics of too many bodies in too small a space. But the effect was catastrophic. The crowd surged. Maria felt Antonio's hand ripped from hers. She screamed his name, but her voice was lost in the roar of 1,000 others. Bodies fell, bodies trampled. The singing turned to screaming. The incense turned to the smell of blood. Maria was pushed to the ground. A boot struck her head. Someone stepped on her chest. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't see. She thought, "This is how I die, in the place where Christ died. Is this your plan, Lord?" And then, nothing. She woke in darkness. Not the darkness of night, but the darkness of a room with no windows, lit only by a kerosene lamp in the corner. Her head throbbed. Her ribs screamed with every breath, but she was alive. "Antonio," she called out. Her voice was a croak. "Antonio, where are you?" A door opened. A man entered. He was perhaps 60 years old, with a thick gray beard and eyes the color of burnt coffee. He wore a white keffiyeh on his head and a long robe that reached his ankles. In his hands he carried a bowl of something that smelled like lentils. "You are awake," he said in heavily accented English. "Good. Eat." "Where am I?" Maria tried to sit up, but pain lanced through her body. "Where is my husband? What happened?" "The stampede," the man said, placing the bowl beside her. "Many died, many injured. I found you in the street. I brought you here." "Where is here?" "My home. You are safe." "I need to find my husband. I need to go back to my hotel. You need to rest." His voice was gentle but firm. "When you are strong, we will talk." He left. The door closed. Maria heard the unmistakable sound of a lock turning. She tried to stand, but her legs would not support her. She tried to scream, but her voice gave out. She tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time in her life, Maria Santos was completely alone. Days passed, perhaps weeks. Without windows, without clocks, time lost all meaning. The man's name was Youssef. He brought her food twice a day, always lentils, sometimes rice, occasionally meat. He checked her wounds, applied ointments that smelled of herbs she didn't recognize. He was not cruel, but he was also not kind. "I need to contact the Portuguese embassy," Maria said one day when her voice had returned. "My husband must be looking for me. My children, there is no embassy here." Youssef's face was unreadable. "We are far from the city." "Then take me to the city. Please, I'll pay you. My family has money." You are not going anywhere. For the first time, something hard entered his voice. You belong here now. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I've done nothing to you. Youssef sat down on a wooden stool across from her bed. The kerosene lamp cast dancing shadows on his weathered face. My wife died 3 years ago, he said. She gave me one son, but no more children. A man needs a wife. I saw you in the street and I knew. Allah sent you to me. I already have a husband. I have 12 children. In Portugal. Youssef shrugged. Portugal is very far. Here, you will be my wife. You will give me more children. This is your life now. Maria felt the room spin. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare from which she would wake. Any moment now, Antonio would shake her shoulder and say, Maria, we're late for Mass. Any moment now. My passport, she said, her voice trembling. Give me my passport and let me go. Youssef reached into his robe and pulled out a small clay bowl. Inside were ashes. What passport? He asked. 10 years. That was how long Youssef kept her locked in that room. 10 years without sunlight, 10 years without news of her family, 10 years of praying to a God who seemed to have abandoned her in the place where his son had died. She gave birth to 3 children during those years. A daughter she named Layla, because Youssef insisted on Arabic names, 2 sons, Omar and Khalil. She loved them. How could she not? They were her children, flesh of her flesh. But every time she looked at them, she saw the faces of Sophia and Elena, the children she had left behind, the children who were growing up without her. Do they think I'm dead? She would ask the darkness. Do my children light candles for me on the Day of the Dead? Does Antonio visit my empty grave? The darkness never answered. It was only after Layla was born that Youssef allowed Maria to leave the house, not to escape. Escape was impossible in a village where everyone knew everyone, where a foreign woman would be reported immediately. But to work, to sell trinkets in the market, to contribute to the household income. Maria sold prayer beads and olive wood crosses to pilgrims visiting the holy sites. The irony was not lost on her. She, a prisoner, selling symbols of faith to those who came and went freely. Sometimes she would see European tourists, Germans, French, even Portuguese. Her heart would race. She would open her mouth to speak, to beg for help. But Youssef's son, now a security officer in the regional police, was never far away. Watching. Always watching. If you try to leave, Youssef had warned her, they will kill me, and then they will kill you, and our children will be orphans. Is that what you want? It was a prison without bars, a cage made of threats and children and the vast uncrossable distance between her and everything she had ever known. But Maria never stopped hoping, never stopped praying, never stopped whispering her story to anyone who would listen. A few words here, a desperate plea there, seeds scattered in the wind, hoping one would take root. 26 years would pass before one finally did. Sofia Santos was 29 years old when she learned her mother might be alive. She was at a funeral, her great-aunt's, an old woman from the village who had lived to 93. The mourners had gathered after the burial, drinking port wine and sharing memories, when a neighbor from Lisbon mentioned something strange. I met the oddest woman in Jordan last year, the neighbor said. A vendor selling rosaries near Petra. She spoke Portuguese, not fluently, but enough. She said she was from northern Portugal, said she had 12 children waiting for her. Sofia's uncle Miguel, Maria's eldest son, now 58, dropped his glass. What did you say? 12 children, the neighbor repeated. I thought it was odd. Who has 12 children these days? And she seemed so sad, like she was carrying a weight no one else could see. Miguel looked at his brother Carlos. Carlos looked at Sofia. Sofia felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Did she say her name? Sofia's voice was barely a whisper. I think so. Maria something. I didn't pay much attention, to be honest. I assumed she was just a local who had learned some Portuguese. Sophia ran outside. She couldn't breathe. She leaned against the stone wall of the church where her mother had been baptized, where she herself had been baptized, where a funeral mass had been held 26 years ago for a woman whose body was never found. 12 children. The number echoed in her mind, 12 children waiting. She had been 3 years old when her mother disappeared. She had no real memories of her, only photographs, stories, and a recurring dream of a woman with dark hair kneeling before her, pressing her forehead against Sophia's, promising to bring her a doll. For 26 years, Sophia had believed her mother died in the stampede, that her body was buried somewhere in Jerusalem, in a grave without a name, that she was in heaven watching over them. But what if she wasn't? What if, all this time, while Sophia graduated from school, fell in love, got married, had children of her own, what if, all this time, her mother was alive, selling rosaries to tourists, whispering her story to anyone who would listen? What if she was waiting? The next 6 months were a fever dream of investigation. Sophia and her uncles contacted the Portuguese Foreign Ministry. They wrote to the consulate in Amman. They reached out to Catholic organizations that operated in the Holy Land. They posted on social media, on forums for missing persons, on websites dedicated to unsolved disappearances. And slowly, impossibly, the testimonies began to come in. A German priest who had visited Jordan 3 years earlier remembered a woman crying near the baptism site of Jesus. She said she was Portuguese, that she had been taken against her will, that her children thought she was dead. A Brazilian tour guide recognized the photograph. "I've seen her. She sells scarves near the citadel in Amman. There's always an old man watching her." An American missionary had spoken to her just months ago. She grabbed my arm. She said, "Tell them I'm alive. Tell my children I never stopped loving them." I thought she was mentally ill. God forgive me. I walked away. Each testimony was a piece of a puzzle that spanned decades and continents, and each piece pointed to the same impossible truth. Maria Santos was alive. But finding her was another matter entirely. A Portuguese television program picked up the story. Within days, it had become a national sensation. The Lost Pilgrim, they called her. A woman swallowed by the Holy Land, presumed dead for a quarter century, now revealed to be a prisoner in plain sight. More witnesses came forward. A hotel cleaner in Lisbon reported a conversation with a Jordanian guest who recognized Maria from her childhood. The guest had given crucial information. A village name, a husband's name, even the name of a shopping center where Maria's son sold prayer beads. The husband's name was Youssef al-Rashid. He was 85 years old. He had 3 wives, Maria being the second, and lived in a village called Al-Dahab, nestled in the hills east of the Jordan River. Al-Dahab, the Golden Village, named for an ancient gold mine that had long since been exhausted. Sophia traced the village on a map. It was 150 kilometers from Amman, accessible only by unpaved roads, a place where outsiders were noticed, where strangers were questioned, where a foreign woman could be hidden in plain sight for 26 years. "We have to go there," she told her uncles. "We have to find her." "It's not that simple," Miguel said. His face was drawn, aged beyond his years by weeks of sleepless nights. "The consulate says they've investigated. They've asked questions in the village, but everyone denies knowing her. They say there's no Portuguese woman there. They say we're chasing ghosts." "They're lying," Sophia said. "They're protecting him." "Of course they're lying. But what can we do? We can't force our way into a foreign country. We can't search house by house. We're not the police." "Then we make the police listen," Sophia said. "We make the whole world listen." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Maria's daughter, Layla. Or rather, from her husband, a man named David, an American aid worker who had met Layla while volunteering in the region. David had heard the family's version of events, that Maria was a convert who had come to Jordan willingly, that she had married Youssef out of love, that she had no desire to return to her former life. But something didn't add up. The way Maria flinched when she spoke of Portugal, the way she cried when she saw European tourists, the way Youssef's son, the police officer, always seemed to be watching. David began to ask questions, careful questions, asked in private when the family wasn't around, and Maria, sensing an ally for the first time in decades, began to tell him the truth. "I have 12 children in Portugal," she whispered, her eyes darting to the door. 12 children who think I'm dead. I was taken. I've been a prisoner. Please, please help me." David wanted to help. He was ready to help. But then the news broke in Portugal, and Maria's photograph appeared on television screens across the world, and everything changed. Youssef's family panicked. If Maria was found, if the truth came out, Youssef would face criminal charges, kidnapping, false imprisonment. Under Jordanian law, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. And his son, the police officer who had helped cover up the crime for decades, his career would be destroyed. Layla, caught between her mother and her father, chose her father. "You have to stop," she told David. "You have to stop asking questions. If you don't, my father will be arrested. My mother will be a widow again. Is that what you want?" David understood then the true nature of Maria's prison. It wasn't the locked room. It wasn't the burned passport. It was love. The impossible, heartbreaking love she had for the children she had borne in captivity. The children who would lose their father if she was freed. Maria was trapped by her own heart. Maria knew they were looking for her. She had seen her own face on the television in the market, older now, but unmistakably her. She had heard the reports, translated by one of the vendors. Her children were searching. Her siblings were searching. The Portuguese government was involved. Interpol had issued an alert. After 26 years, the world finally knew her story. And now she was being hidden. Youssef's family had moved her from the village. They said it was for her safety. They said the attention was dangerous. They said she should stay quiet, stay hidden until the storm passed. But Maria knew the truth. They were afraid of what would happen if she spoke to the authorities, afraid of the justice that awaited Youssef, afraid of losing everything they had built on the foundation of her captivity. "Think of your children here," Layla pleaded. "Think of Omar and Khalil. Think of your grandchildren. If father goes to prison, who will provide for them?" "I have 12 other children," Maria said, her voice steady. 12 children who have grown up without a mother. 12 children who lit candles at my empty grave. Don't they deserve to know the truth? You made a life here. You made a family here. That has to mean something." Maria looked at her daughter, this child born of violence and imprisonment, this daughter she loved despite everything. How could she explain that love and captivity were not the same thing, that she could cherish the children she had borne here while still mourning the children she had lost? "It means everything," Maria said finally, "but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the truth." That night, Maria made her decision. She would not run. She would not hide. She would not pretend any longer. She would tell her story, all of it, and let the consequences fall where they may. For 26 years she had been silent. For 26 years she had been invisible. For 26 years she had been Maria al-Rashid, a dutiful wife, a loving mother, a prisoner without chains. But her name was Maria Santos. She was from Aldeia da Serra, Portugal. She had 12 children waiting for her, and she was done waiting to come home. The stone path leading to the Santos farmhouse was the same one Maria had walked 27 years ago when she left for Jerusalem. The same olive trees lined the road. The same church bell tolled in the distance. Even the air smelled the same, wood smoke and rosemary and the faint sweetness of ripening grapes. But everything was different. Antonio had died 8 years ago. He had never remarried, never stopped hoping, never stopped lighting candles at the church where they had been wed. "She's alive," he had told their children, even as his body failed him. "I feel it in my bones. She's alive, and one day she'll come home." He had been right. He had just not lived long enough to see it. Sophia stood at the end of the path, holding her own daughter, a girl of 3, the same age Sophia had been when Maria left. The child had Maria's dark eyes, Maria's stubborn chin, Maria's way of tilting her head when she was curious. "Grandmother is coming," Sophia whispered to the child. "Grandmother is finally coming home." A car appeared at the top of the hill, then another, then a procession of vehicles carrying Maria, her lawyers, her government escorts, and, following at a distance, a few Portuguese journalists who had covered her story from the beginning. The car stopped. The door opened, and Maria Santos stepped onto Portuguese soil for the first time in 27 years. She was 74 years old. Her hair, once black as night, was now entirely white. Her face was weathered by years of desert sun. Her hands, once soft, were calloused from decades of labor. But her eyes were the same, dark and deep and burning with a fire that 27 years of captivity had never extinguished. Sophia took one step forward, then another. Then she was running, her daughter bouncing in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Mama," she sobbed, falling into Maria's arms. "Mama, mama, mama." Maria held her, held this daughter she had last seen as a toddler, now a grown woman with children of her own, held her the way she had imagined holding her 10,000 times in that windowless room, in that village prison, in those endless years of waiting and hoping and never giving up. "I told you," Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "I told you I would bring you a doll." She reached into her bag, the same bag she had carried for years in the markets of Jordan, and pulled out a small wooden doll, carved from olive wood, painted by hand. "I bought it 27 years ago," Maria said. "I kept it all this time, waiting to give it to you." Sophia couldn't speak. She could only hold her mother and weep for the years they had lost, for the pain they had endured, for the miracle of this moment that had seemed impossible for so long. One by one, Maria's other children arrived. Miguel, Carlos, Elena, all 11 who had survived to adulthood. They surrounded her, embraced her, touched her face as if to confirm she was real. Elena, the youngest, the one who had been only 8 months old when Maria left, stood apart for a moment. She had no memories of her mother, not a single one. To her, Maria had always been a photograph on the mantel, a name spoken in prayers, a ghost. Maria saw her hesitation. She walked over, slowly, and took Elena's hands in hers. "You were sleeping when I left," Maria said. "In your sister Clara's arms. I kissed your forehead. I promised I would come back." "It took you a long time," Elena said, her voice small. "Yes," Maria's eyes glistened. "It took me a very long time, but I never forgot you, not for a single day, not for a single moment." Elena stepped forward and fell into her mother's arms. The sun set over Aldea de Serra, painting the mountains gold and purple. The church bell rang, calling the faithful to evening prayer. And on the stone path leading to the Santos farmhouse, a family stood together for the first time in 27 years. Maria looked up at the sky, the same sky she had looked at from that windowless room, dreaming of home. "Thank you," she whispered. To God, perhaps. Or to Antonio, watching from wherever souls go. Or simply to the universe for allowing her this moment. She was home. After all this time, she was finally home.